live. Good.
It's better than the alternative.
Yeah. We're breathing, which is really good.
One more day on Earth. That's all we got. One more day, Leo.
So a big welcome to everybody. My name is Liam from PCPSI, and a big welcome to you, Steve.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Where are you in the world geographically at the moment?
At the moment, I am geographically upstairs in my house, in my home office in Pflugerville, Texas.
Okay.
And we'll get a test later to see who can spell Pflugerville, but that's where I am at home today.
Great. So before we start, I'd like to just really encourage anybody that has questions to send them in straight away. We didn't have many questions on the last webinar, but I found out afterwards that people were trying to send them in, but they had some problem. So I actually have the questions, so we can ask them as well, which is great.
Good, and they can also find us in Northern Ireland in a few weeks. We'd love to have them show up there too.
Definitely. We're in Northern Ireland. We're in Belfast on the 5th and the 6th of July. The 2-day workshop is called Trauma, Regulation and Building Resiliency, Recovery After Developmental Trauma. And I think it will give people, Steve, a real appreciation of the training that we're going to be doing in 2020, a real insight into your work, of how you work, the importance of your work, the map that you use, and then
the difference. You know, we did that program in Cork a few months ago, or last September. I guess that's more than a few months ago. The difference is in Belfast, what we realized after the fact in Cork was that we needed more actual live demos. So I've weaved in, you know, to where we'll get at least 3 live people from the audience.
Yeah.
I have no idea who they are. We'll be able to experience the work in front of everyone. So we'll be doing at least 3 live demos.
Wow.
So it should be, give them greater awareness of what can happen and the possibilities of what happens when we're doing the work with our clients.
Great. That should be great, Steve. And then you're coming to Cork again in 2020 for a 15-day training, which is transforming the experience-based brain.
Yes.
It's going to be broken into 3 5-day modules. First module is the 6th to the 10th of February. Second module is the 11th to the 15th of June. And the third module is the 24th to the 28th of September. And actually that training is filling up already, Steve.
Excellent.
So people have signed up for the whole training. We have some people signed up for the first module. So anybody that's interested in doing that training, sign up as soon as possible, because we're going to limit the training to 40 places. 40 is plenty. And we're going to close it after that, because 40 will give each student a good experience.
Yes. And the smaller number means that I will have the opportunity to get to know each individual student on a different level than as a teacher to student. I will, you know, normally we teach to big, large groups, but when we're doing this intimate of a work, it's so much better when we show up with the number 40, because it really allows me to get a more clear picture of where the student is actually, what experiences they're having in life and how that folds into their work. So it's a much richer experience with that number than to have the large numbers. So I am excited to be there with 40.
Great. Looking forward to it, Steve, really am. Okay, so, that sheet is gone. So to start, Steve, maybe if we just start a little bit about the training. So if I'm going to sign up for the training next year, what am I likely to get? How will I be a more compassionate, competent caregiver after completing the training?
Well, what you're going to get is an experience you've never had before, probably. Most therapists, most clinicians, most healers are not experienced with a direct approach of working through trauma through the somatic experience, understanding that the body holds all the trauma, holds all the memory, holds all the information around the trauma. Everything is held in the body. So this program, the way it's going to make you more competent and compassionate is that we really work on who we are, as well as learning about how we're going to be working with the client. They're going to develop a level of comfort with touch, transforming touch specifically. Transforming touch is very measured. It doesn't take a wizard, so to speak, to come in to figure out how to do it. There's nothing about the process where you're just going to be stuck and wondering, well, what am I supposed to be feeling or what is supposed to be happening? You're going to be doing it, the protocols, in a very organized manner. You move step by step by step by step. In the initial protocol, you're really only touching a few places in the body, the kidney adrenal area, the brain stem, and the ankles. It's very measured out time-wise so that you build more security within your client, where the client understands that the work you're doing is safe. You work from the concepts or the practices of Bowlby. Bowlby's work on attachment and attachment theory is creating a safe and secure place for the client to come, that you're the secure base and that you are ready, able, and capable of being secure for them, where they can meet you, where they can tell you what's happening and you're able to hear it. They're going to learn other techniques, but it's truly a program that when you attend, you go home after the very first module and you start working. It's not a delay. The second module makes the first module that much better, and the third is even greater than that, because in the third we break down some individual complex traumas and working with how we work directly with those. So it's an experience of learning a protocol and then learning the add-ons or the enhancements to that protocol, and re-establishing and rebuilding a neuro platform where your client can re-establish, well, not even re-establish, the word would be establish, because with developmental trauma, many people were not able to establish a neural platform that is able to support them in relationship and work and throughout their life. So we're going to establish new platforms. And it's a training that many people walk away from and go home and do some amazing work right off the bat. I mean, it's not like you have to wait until you learn everything. We really have targeted it to where you take home a piece of it and you start applying it and you start seeing results immediately.
Totally. I get that, Steve, because even I was working with a client yesterday, first session, and when the client came in, I could see straight away in a very high level of hypervigilance. When he got on the table, he couldn't even tolerate me looking at him. The eyes were all over the place. And actually, by the end of the session, he said he never experienced the internal state that he experienced after 40 minutes. And you could see that his eyes were actually after relaxing. Right. The whole body was after dropping down. So, no, you don't always get it that profound, but right. But it can be that profound.
Yes.
And I think what you said that was really significant is that the regulation protocol, I think it took me a long time to get, and I think it takes a lot of practitioners a long time to get how important that protocol is, and that's actually all that you might be doing for the first year or two, and
Right.
actually only doing that, you might need not to do anything else.
Yes, the basic, what we call the 7-point protocol, which is the protocol that is focused on developing regulation and developing relationship. Both of those two things happen. That protocol by itself, with no additional enhancements added to it, runs around an 80% rate of bringing recovery for the client, about an 80%. So that's the majority of the people that come to see you are going to get better without ever doing another enhancement. The additional 20% or 10%, you know, the numbers are kind of back and forth. Then we do some additional enhancements for those folks. And, but the initial protocol brings about the earlier platform where you can do the enhancements, where you can do the other parts, to where the client has a better opportunity of letting it become real, letting it become their information, their platform, and greater experience of vulnerability will come out of the client.
Okay. So let's go on, Steve. And you mentioned some really important concepts in the last call that we'll get into a bit more detail this time. So two in particular, I think, are really important to understand. First one is defensive accommodation, and the second is the fore window.
Okay. All right. Defensive accommodations. When we look at a client, or we look at anyone, we all have defensive accommodations. Coming back from the theory of window of tolerance, if we're looking at a window of tolerance, what's supposed to happen is that the sympathetic rises and the parasympathetic meets it and brings it back down. Sympathetic rises, the arousal happens with a threat response. Parasympathetic comes in and says, everything is okay, lower the bridge, come back down. Then the person stays within their own, regulation system. They're within their own window of tolerance. When there's been early trauma, developmental trauma in the client's life, that doesn't work because we know we have fight, flight, and freeze. We know we have those three modalities when we're threatened. These have been researched, they've been studied for years, everyone believes that. Fight, flight, and fear. So if I'm looking at fight, flight, and freeze, rather, where would the baby go? A baby couldn't fight. A baby can't get up and run away. That's impossible. So it's an inescapable trauma that the baby is going to be experiencing. And in that inescapable, the only place they can go is freeze. So once you freeze, doesn't mean you automatically fall into this category. It's from exhausting the freeze state. You freeze and you freeze and you freeze and you freeze. Once you do this repetitive type of freeze, your system no longer can go into the window of tolerance. And when the sympathetic rises, the parasympathetic meets it and brings it down. The parasympathetic is more not capable. It misses the target. It either overshoots or undershoots. It can't get the regulation in place that's necessary. So what we develop is that when these functions don't work correctly, when the parasympathetic is not able to bring the sympathetic down out of an aroused state, what happens is that we have defensive accommodations. We have behaviors. These behaviors are the defensive accommodations that tend to keep us safe. they push the parasympathetic into position, and they push the sympathetic arousal down. They hold it down. The defensive accommodations are also the same thing that we can look at as parts, or parts theory. When we think about internal family systems, or we think about structural dissociation, we think about these, and we can look at these behaviors as parts. These parts, we're all born with survival parts. And these are just additional parts that have been labeled. And normally, if this is looking like IFS, internal family systems, these might be firefighters. These might be the bigger defensive accommodations, maybe the bigger parts that are showing up to really do the work of helping the manager part, which is the part that keeps the exiles away. These defensive accommodations may just be that. They may just be the firefighters coming in to help the managers keep the exiles away, because under no circumstances do we want these exiles to come into fruition, because we don't know how big the trauma was, we don't know what's going to happen with the trauma, because we don't have any cognitive ability to look at the developmental trauma. So these defensive accommodations, they're just adding on to the situation. They're showing up totally with anticipation of regulating the sympathetic, doing the job of the parasympathetic, actually replacing the parasympathetic or boosting the parasympathetic, however you want to look at it. They're actually doing that job by leveling down the sympathetic, leveling it down, leveling it down. Now, when you experience repeated trauma, repeated threat, and that can be from your caretaker, or it could be the inability of your caretaker to be with you because of medical reasons, or another whole host of reasons. These outcomes tend to become real, that the infant is in such a fright stage that they just fall over into what we call high-tone dorsal state. High-tone dorsal is unmyelinated. The dorsal system kind of comes through, and the dorsal system, we're supposed to have low-tone dorsal, which helps with our digestive system, sleep, reproduction. All of those parts are in that dorsal, low-tone dorsal. But when we don't get out of the free state, we go to high-tone dorsal. And high-tone dorsal looks just like someone's state, looks just like a state of someone who wasn't experiencing trauma. Everything happens over here that happens over here. You still have to grow up, you still have to go to school, you still have to do these things, but we develop a faux window of tolerance in this high-tone dorsal state. That faux window of tolerance acts just like a regular window of tolerance, except it's in the high-tone dorsal state. And the client develops this feeling of, this is normal. This is how. So they have a whole host of parts that are working within the high-tone dorsal system, and a whole host of defensive accommodations that are just keeping them in this faux window. So the faux window is the substitute for the actual window of tolerance, but it's in the high-tone dorsal state. And the person lives in the high-tone dorsal state. The cost of doing business, or the allostatic load, is very expensive. And we know from studies like the Adverse Childhood Experience study that was done out of San Diego over the last 20 years, we know that it brings on early death, it brings on lack of relationship, it brings on early diabetes for many, brings on more possibilities of cancers. I mean, there's a whole host of things that happen when you live in that high-tone dorsal state, where people come in and they try to negotiate you to move over to a low-tone state. We found that through this regulation system, we're able to provide enough regulation that this client is able to bring about their own regulation eventually. And through that regulation, they can eliminate that faux window and start experiencing life with less static load, allostatic load, with less amount of work, with less cost. So that faux window is extremely important to realize when someone has early trauma, that they're probably in that faux window. They've probably never been to their actual window of tolerance. And it kind of, the way I see it changing is that through the regulation, through us supporting the system, through us being the secure base, through us developing a relationship and supporting the client's regulation, instead of this one closing the high tone dorsal and the non-high tone dorsal just coming into play, I really think they merge like this and they lay over, and they're kind of like the Venn diagram, you know, they come together and they begin to share space. And that space gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they develop a whole new state that looks and functions just like someone who was never traumatized. Looks just like it. So, but they merge. It's not like this one closes and this one all of a sudden goes, oh, here I am, I'm bright and beautiful and I'm aware. It doesn't work that way. They merge. And by merging, we never kill off, integrate, terminate, extinguish. We never do any of those to those parts. We just lay off the parts. We let the parts know, you know, we appreciate the work you're doing. We don't need this now. Now you can just hang out and be, just join in to watch and be present, but you don't have to work so hard, which changes the allostatic load and can bring a person back into a state of health that they may never have been in their whole life. And it reduces the fear. When we move too fast and a client goes from this faux window into the actual window, my experience is it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying because it's somewhere they've never been and it's quiet. And in that quiet space, they're not used to it. They're used to a constant static. They're used to some noise that's going on all the time that they can't do anything about. And they don't even realize that noise is there until they realize that noise is another part. And that noise is keeping them safe. So when they fall into this place and they move over into this actual window of tolerance, and they experience that safety, at that moment, it's a pretty scary feeling for everything to go quiet. It's what's supposed to happen in birth. When we're coming out of the womb into the world, there's a moment in there that should be completely silent for the baby. So this brings them back to that silence. That can be scary. So we work with our client to be sure that we're merging and we're not extinguishing
Okay.
the two worlds.
Okay. Okay, so you said a lot there, Steve, and really a lot. So defensive accommodations, they're typically addictive behaviors. They can be physiological behaviors, they can be cognitive behaviors. So the behaviors are body senses are they're on all levels really. They're physiological, they're emotional, they're spiritual, they're behavioral. Yeah.
Yes, they are everywhere, with the understanding or the awareness that all of these defensive accommodations, their goal is either to bring us closer or push us further away. Mostly push us further away from relationship. They mostly inhibit our ability to connect to other people. So if I'm drinking, 12 pints a day, so that I don't have to experience this world, no one is it also prevents other people from experiencing me.
Mm.
And that's the big fear. Oftentimes, when you have developmental trauma, people are afraid of relationships. They're afraid of someone experiencing them because, Liam, if I really knew you, you know, if you were in this category and I really knew you, I'm trying to think how to put this. Let's change that scenario. If I'm developmentally traumatized, which I am, and somebody came forward and they wanted to know who I am, I might be extremely afraid for you to know who I am, because if you knew who I am, you wouldn't want anything to do with me.
Yeah.
So instead of you saying, you know, you're not good enough, or you're not smart enough, or you're not pretty enough to be my friend or my lover or whatever, my partner, however, whatever the approach is, let me do these behaviors to keep you away.
Mm.
Because the bottom of the V coming down, if we have a funnel, the bottom of that funnel is keeping people away from knowing who I am. The fear of you discovering who I really am, and if you really knew who I was, you would have nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So all of these behaviors are preventing you from that huge experience of knowing who I am.
Yeah. And I think the other part that really jumped out, Steve, and I know you talk a lot about parts, and parts, we know parts from the internal family systems and from Janina Fisher's structural dissociation model.
Right.
And I was talking to somebody today, and I think this is a big part of it, that actually it's in us wanting to get rid of parts, get rid of anxiety, get rid of the depression, get rid of whatever, which causes the big problem. So that we, you know, what you're saying is that in a way we're developing more self-acceptance for our parts, and that we actually never get rid of them. No, they can change roles in our life. So a part that makes me anxious all the time, that part now can actually do something else for me.
Yes.
But this is, you know, it's kind of liberating that I don't get rid of anything. I don't reject any part of my experience. Actually building up the self-acceptance is something that's going to be very helpful and something that's going to be very healthy.
You just described self-compassion.
Mm.
And so many people I see and have seen over the years have no self-compassion.
Yeah.
But, you know, agreement is a huge part of my work, and understanding, you know, with families, with children, with who have been traumatized, as well as with working with adults. I don't meet you with a battle. I'm not coming in with a battle. I have to, you know, worked and seen it work so many times that if I'm just in agreement with what you're saying, it de-escalates on its own. The sympathetic arousal will de-escalate.
Mm.
Oftentimes people go to therapists, or they show up in their own family system. If they do something, then they get attacked for it. We got to extinguish this behavior. We have to do away with this. So, you know, a child who says to the parent, because of whatever reason, they say, you know, I hate you. I hate your guts. And the parent being able to say back, you hate me, with no argument, de-escalates. As soon as that parent comes back in and says, no matter if you hate me or not, I still love you, they're setting it up where the child never gets the experience of agreement. In the experience of agreement, we develop relationship. So why would I want to get rid of one of your parts? Ever. I want to make friends with them. I want to tell them how grateful I am for them, what a terrific job they do every day, 24/7, how they showed up for you when things were really bad, and if it weren't for them, you would probably be dead. I want to go in there and do that kind of work with a part. And I'm not going to say, you know, I'm done with you. I might say to a part, you know, you've been really good at hypervigilance. You've really watched everywhere, 360 degrees, and you've kept me safe. I don't need that anymore. But I was wondering, would you be willing to keep your eyes open and stay vigilant towards a snake, for instance, or something else that might be scary to me? Can we move that over to here? Or you've done a terrific job. It's okay for you to sit back and relax for a while. When I need you again, I will call you forward. But for right now, you can sit back and relax and just be part of the group and let them relax down. But to come in and say, you know, I don't like what you're doing, and I don't like how you're handling it, and I don't like anything you're saying, so I want you to go away. I want to extinguish you, or I want you to merge with another part. No. Not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's a threat. That's a new threat to the system, and every threat to the system moves us away from getting better.
Yeah. And so, like, parts won't change their role until there's enough regulation on board.
That is exact, until they're no longer needed in their job performance.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And I think just the last point on what you were saying then, because it's really so important again, Steve, you really highlighted the idea of capacity. In that with developmental trauma, you can take it that there's going to be either a very narrow or no window of tolerance. And I think what's hugely significant about that, if I'm your therapist, if I'm working with you, and I'm not attuned to that, and I actually think that you have a window of tolerance, then all the therapy is going to be doing is that we're together going to be strengthening your management strategies or your defensive accommodation.
Right. So it's really coming in differently than the normal approach. It really is coming in to work with what's already there instead of trying to change what's there or get rid of what's there. It's really about showing up to work with what you have.
Yeah. What
is showing up, and understanding that capacity increases only through regulation, and understanding that, you know, in the hierarchy of healing, that down here we're bottom up, but we're going to use the brain too. At one point we're going to flip over, you know, when we hit self-regulation, and we're going to use the top down instead of bottom up. And we're going to convert again back into bottom up, to where the system has a greater capacity to handle the changes and to change the locus of control. Instead of everything being external and somebody else's fault, being able to share that responsibility. That only happens through regulation, through capacity.
Okay. So just another interesting point, Steve, and I'm going to do a quote now from your colleague, Cathy Kane. So Cathy is the co-author of the book, Nurturing Resiliency. So Cathy says, sometimes we are an unreliable witness to our own experience.
That is correct.
And I think what she's meaning is that those of us with developmental trauma have such a well-developed danger map that we haven't created a safety map. So how does transforming touch help to create a safety map?
Well, the whole idea is that we're unreliable witnesses to our own experiences, that because of the threat response, we develop a hypersensitivity around ourselves. And that hypersensitivity to the world around us means that anything that comes close. So if I'm afraid of snakes, and I see a stick on the ground, I'm going to assume that stick is a snake.
Mm.
That's developmental trauma. We're unreliable resource because we're so worried about staying alive that we just cannot really see the truth in what's happening around us. Transforming touch takes that concept and realizes your capacity may look like this. Your window of tolerance could look like this. Flat. Through building regulation. In building that regulation, I'm also building relationship, building a sense of security through attachment. We begin to open the window of tolerance. It expands, not just one way, it goes both ways. So it's expanding like this. As it expands, you become a better witness of your own experiences because you have more capacity. I cannot look at something twice if I'm afraid that they're going to kill me or I'm not going to survive. I have to disappear immediately. But as I develop that capacity, I can look and go, oh, that stick looks like a snake. And instead of running, I can go, is it a snake or is it a stick? Ah, stick, I'm safe, and move on through. That's what transforming touch does. It expands our awareness and our ability to witness what's happening in the moment in our life to give us just a second thought. When you live with developmental trauma, you don't know what a second thought even means. Everything is a first thought. Everything's exactly the way I see it, and it's bad and it's dangerous and I have to get away. A second thought says, is that a stick or is that a snake?
Mm.
Even saying that, I could just feel the relief in my own system. That my immediate impression doesn't always have to be what guides every step of my life and relationship. Doesn't guide who I'm friends with and who I'm not friends with, who I'm lovers with, none of that's going to be guided by fear. It's going to be guided by a second chance, a second thought, a second opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm imagining one of the big things that it will give you is choice.
Yes. Wouldn't it be amazing, Liam, if the world was a whole series of whys in the road instead of just one way?
Mm.
I wonder what it would have been like going back to the beginning if, oh yeah, I have two choices here. I could go this direction or this direction. I can go the left or to the right. Instead of having to lock it and think, this is the only way. We hear that in politics, we hear that in government, we hear it in life all the time. There's only one way to do it. My way, you know, I live in the South, the southern part of the United States. And not just in the South, but there's a common statement here that people say, my way or the highway. Means that if you can't agree with me, if you have a different thought, a different behavior, a different sexual orientation, whatever your difference is, I can't tolerate that and you need to go away.
Yeah.
That isn't life. My gosh, I want to experience, oh, this is different. You're different than anything I've ever come in contact with. So I can look at you and I can go down a road that says, well, maybe everything's going to be fine. Why don't I take a risk? Instead of just shutting down and going my way or the highway. Only one way. Safety comes in all colors, all diversity, all types of life situations. Safety appears and shows up.
Great, Steve. And I'm just conscious of the time. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you a last question. I'm going to call this, I made it specially up for you now. I want you to think of a scenario now, okay? So you have two clients that you've never met before. all you know is that one has a history of developmental trauma and one does not, but you don't know anything about their histories. So you're going to do a session of transforming touch with the client with developmental history, and you're going to do a session of transforming touch with the client without developmental trauma. What are you likely to notice in their physiology that will tell you which client has developmental trauma?
The one with developmental trauma, I don't know which is which. My eyes are closed. They come in and they get on my table.
Well,
not at the same time, but they're,
yeah, you have a blindfold, and all you can use is the touch.
I should do that easy.
Yeah.
That's an easy question. Thank you for ending today with one of the easiest questions. People who have, first of all, my initial touch, I won't know the difference.
Okay.
It's going to take a minute. And within a very brief amount of time, I'm going to begin to notice constriction. I'm going to begin to notice that the energetic flow on one of them is different than the other. I'm going to begin to notice their responses to my movement of my hand, how they respond to where I'm touching them. I'm going to notice their face. I might notice their skin tone begin to change. I might see them going more pale. I might notice a sensation of perspiration coming on their body. You know, I might hear cracking in their voice when they speak. I'm going to know the difference.
Okay.
Very quickly. Someone, though, in all fairness, who's been extremely well, their parts do an extremely good job in the high tone dorsal, it might take me 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Because they're so protected, you can't tell at first. But when they show up and they tell me who's coming, immediately I feel a sense of relief. On some level, their system goes, finally, somebody gets it.
Okay.
So that's probably the difference.
Great, Steve. And so we'll just move into questions now. And I think we have a few questions, but I think I'll start with the questions that came in from the last webinar.
All right, sure, go ahead.
So we have a question from Kerry. Hello, Kerry. So I have a significant developmental trauma history myself. And what I find is that when I do touch work with clients, I find myself dissociating. 1 minute, my attention is on the client's adrenal gland. The next, I'm thinking about shopping. The frequency and duration of these episodes vary from client to client. How much of this is mine and how much is the touch work tapping into the client's experience? Does this process make the touch work less effective?
Okay, first of all, I want to address significant developmental trauma. All developmental trauma is significant.
Okay.
It can't be measured. Oftentimes I hear words like significant or severe or over the top. It doesn't, developmental trauma, for anyone who's experienced it knows, there's moments of feeling hopeless, lost, unwanted, isolated. All of those feelings are true and they come about. So I just want to address that word significant.
Sure.
In my book, everybody who has developmental trauma is significantly affected. Second of all, I would be two-faced if I sat here and said I had never gone shopping in the middle of the session. I would be two-faced if I said I never dissociated. Those, dissociation is a normal organic experience that we all have the capacity for in our systems. Dissociation is how we are set up to avoid bad things happening.
Mm.
So if I look at it from that way, I'm like, the reason that transforming touch has come into play over normal or regular touch or different touch is that it's done by time. There's a really neat app that you can do called Insight Timer, where you can actually have a Tibetan bell ring every so many minutes that tells you to move to the next spot. So you're not required to pay attention the whole time. You do the best you can to show up. And by showing up, even if you go shopping, you're doing more than that client's ever experienced before.
Okay.
So by using something like the Insight Timer, we take and we divide the 7. Let's say we're going to do 5 minutes per spot. 5 times 7 is 35 minutes. So you just set the timer to go off every 5 minutes, and every 5 minutes you hear bong. It's not intrusive to your client or to you, and you just move to the next place. So it takes in the idea that we all dissociate. It takes in the idea that we all go shopping. Anyone who can tell me that they can stay 100% focused on the client throughout a session, I want to meet them, because all of our brains go all different directions. That's why transforming touch is so much more powerful, in my opinion, than other forms of touch, because it's timed. It sets the stage for the therapist to be a therapist. We all bring our history with us into every session. We work the best we can to be as secure base as possible during the session. That's all we ask for.
Great, great. So, okay, so the next question is from Alison, Steve. So when I finish a touch session with clients, I leave the room to wash my hands, as there's no sink in my room. When I return, some clients have got off the table already, even though I encourage them to relax. What's the potential significance in this?
Well, what the client is showing us is that the client doesn't trust you. The client has an issue probably around the issue of abandonment, and they're afraid you're not coming back. So they're going to go find you. So they're getting set up so that they don't they're too afraid to wait. So you really want to be clear with them and say, I'm just going to step out of the room now and wash my hands. I need for you to stay on the table, to keep laying here. Just relax for a moment, to let the work begin to settle in, and I'll come back and then we'll go forward from there. But really be clear with the direction. And that's something she probably wants to do before the session even starts.
Okay.
Have the client agree.
Okay.
Once they're more regulated, their ability to agree or remember may not be there.
Okay. Okay. And then we have Melanie from London. So Melanie says, I'm new to touch work, Steve. When I'm doing table work, I have one particular client whose stomach makes very loud noises. This causes her embarrassment. Am I right in saying this is a good sign that her stomach is coming out of shutdown?
Yes, because the stomach is usually the last to come out of the shutdown. So yes. And what I do is in my teaching beforehand, I talk about the parasympathetic response to threat. And then when the stomach begins growling or they have gas or anything that's coming around that digestive part, I say, awesome, there we go. The parasympathetic is doing its job now. And in doing its job, we have peristalsis. And peristalsis sometimes is noisy. This is a great experience. I hear you. I see you, but I also hear you healing.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we have about 4 other questions, Steve. Can you see them from your side, or do you want me to read them out?
Is it worth doing the training for personal development, or is it really just to enhance client work? Is that the first question you
That's the
have?
first question, yeah. Is it worth doing the training for personal development, or is it really just to enhance client work? Yeah.
It has been, that's an interesting question because across the line, people have all sorts of answers, I'm sure. My answer is, I don't care if you're doing it for personal development or you're doing it to work with a client. It doesn't matter to me why you're doing it. What's important to me is that you understand that the scope of the class is that it's being taught so that you can work with others. There's a lot of performance in the class and a lot of experience that affects you directly as the student. So to separate personal development out of enhancing the client work, I wouldn't separate those two, because without personal development, we never are able to enhance our client work. We don't see them. I even encourage people to attend experiential groups, which hopefully we'll be able to do in Ireland following the training, where we have more capacity for people to do their own work. So if you're coming to do your own work, you're welcome. Just know that, it's a teaching environment and that the majority of the students present are there to learn how to work with clients. And if it's too much for you, you need to go, you need to go home early, or however, how we work that out, we'll work it out. There'll be assistance there to help. We also will be offering some private sessions to students. So they can sign up and take private sessions with the assistants. I'm not big on limiting people's exposure to healing. Anyone's welcome. We do the best we can with what we get, but I'm not going to knock somebody out for that reason. Okay?
Great.
All right. Anonymous said, how would you work to restore trust after a rupture in the therapeutic relationship? Wonder if there is anything more different needed with clients with developmental trauma. Yes. When you have a rupture, it's 100% the therapist's fault. Right off the bat. Just like a parent with a child. It's never the child's fault, it's the parent's fault. And we apologize all the time. A normal part of rupture is repair, and we need to embrace that as clinicians. And we just apologize and say, I'm really sorry this happened. I'm sorry that, you thought I did this. I really am sorry. And so we repair our ruptures as we go through them. And just like a parent to a child, 100% our fault. We don't ever blame our client for the rupture. Especially in developmental trauma, you start blaming people and all you're doing is reenactments. And sometimes in our client's healing, they will set us up for reenactment. They'll set it up to where they'll have an opportunity to push us away and to see if we're real and to see if we're really going to hang out and stay with them. So get ready when you're working in developmental trauma to say, I'm sorry a lot, because if I ever went through a full day without a rupture, I would be startled and shocked. I have them all the time. I just apologize and try to move forward and do a repair. Okay, Lois.
You actually owe me a few sorries.
I was going to tell you they're in the mail. I still love you, Liam. Okay, Lois said, I just ordered the book. I do healing touch, energy work.
Sorry, Steve, you missed one. There's one above that from Nikki.
Okay, well, let me get this one, then we'll jump back up to Nikki. Because I already started this one, then I'll roll back up. I just ordered the book. I do healing touch, energy work with clients with developmental trauma. I find that touch combined with the story works well. My question is the transforming touch works like they are similar? Is transforming touch like healing touch? It is healing touch. It's healing touch with a protocol. That's the big difference. The book isn't going to go into transforming touch as much as it is touch and regulation. Transforming touch is something you get through this class. The protocol is only in this class, not in somatic resilience regulation. If I were to compare, for instance, Kathy Kane does touch skills training. I do transforming the experience-based brain, which includes transforming touch. And then we have somatic resilience and regulation. If I were going to line those up and say, what's the difference? Touch skills training is primarily for shock trauma. Transforming the experience-based brain teaches you a protocol for working directly with touch, directly with developmental trauma. Somatic resilience and regulation is an advanced developmental trauma workshop, does not teach specific protocol like transforming touch for the beginning of the work and the ongoing work, but is much higher level thinking. So that's kind of how they move through. So yes, transforming touch is healing touch. Now the word healing touch, there's a whole lot of different versions of that. So I don't know which one they're referring to, but overall, right in there together. Nikki asked, I have developmental trauma including in utero. Is the training still suitable for me? Give it a try and we'll see where we land. Fair enough? I think I answered that question earlier when the person right before was asking about, is it okay for them to come to the training if they have trauma? Yes. I hope, and I would imagine it would be similar to what happens here in the States. Everyone in the class has developmental trauma, including the one teaching. So we make it work. Anonymous, how would you handle a client who is very sensitive to touch? This side of the hand is extremely sensitive. This side of the hand is less sensitive. I might touch with this way, with the back of my hand instead of the front of the hand. I might just do intentional touch, which means I sit next to you and hold in my mind that I'm touching you without ever physically touching you. I might let you touch me first. I might say, why don't you just reach over and touch me instead of me touching you? So there's several ways of working with that, and we get more in depth when we get into the training. But people who are sensitive, there's a multitude of reasons that people are sensitive, but we work on that and try to figure that out. The next person says, I'd like to know more about this. Where is their full training? The full training is coming to Ireland. You want to give us the dates again, Liam?
So it's 2020. The first module is the 6th to the 10th of February. Second module, the 11th to the 15th of June. And the third module is the 24th to the 28th of September. And it will be down in Cork, where Steve was last year.
We are less than a year out. It's getting close to start. We're not very far away now, at all now. And the last person said, thank you, really helpful answers. Thank you for listening. I am so grateful. I could never share how grateful I am for the people who listen, the people who study with me, the people who show up for the trainings, the people who support me around the world. I am so grateful every time I get the opportunity that possibly one person who has developmental trauma is going to be seen, going to be heard, and be believed. It's a huge process for me.
Steve, thank you. That was amazing. That finishes our webinar series for now, but we will most likely, if you're open to it, do some more webinars around September, October, November and December. Have some series again just in the build up to the training, just to give people appreciation of the work and everything that you do. And I would really encourage people to come to Belfast on the 5th and the 6th, because anybody that's thinking about the training, you know, the 2 days will just be so full. And especially now with the extra demos that you're putting on, I think it'll be an amazing 2 days. And
I would be thrilled to meet them all in Belfast. And on the seminars, the ones we do, the webinars,
yeah,
I would like to offer that when we're full, that we're still going to do the webinars with the folks that are already in the group to give them a little jump start to the training.
brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So great. Big thanks to everybody that joined us. We had a big enough crowd tonight. I think we had nearly 50 people on it, so it was great. So listen, I look forward to seeing you in July, Steve.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in just a few weeks. We actually won't be very long now. We'll be landing in Ireland, which is such a wonderful country. And then we'll be going into Northern Ireland to experience a new and different place. But we're excited to be there, excited to be coming.
Great, great. And I look forward to meeting your 2 sons and look forward to meeting Ellen again. And
I've already got both of my sons studying Irish now to where they can be sure they know the language.
yeah.
They both cannot wait to get there. They're both very excited to be in Ireland. So
Great.
It's going to be a fun trip for all of us.
Okay, so listen, enjoy the rest of the day, Steve, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much. Good night, Liam.
Take care. Bye.